Irashaimase! Hello and welcome to Fataris' Kitchen. I'm your host, Chef Fataris. It's time once again for Shoot 'em Up Saturday, and on the menu this Saturday we have P-47, the Freedom Fighter. Another arcade classic available as an arcade archive. What kind of taste will it have? Let's get cooking and find out. From developer NMK and publisher Jalico, P-47 released to arcades in 1988. So it's a horizontal scrolling shoot 'em up based around the World War II fighter, the P-47 Thunderbolt. It's now available on the Nintendo Switch and the PlayStation 4, courtesy of Hamster as an arcade archive title. So, as far as its taste is concerned, I feel this one's a relatively bland shoot 'em up, and we'll just dive right into it so I can kind of show what I mean by that. So throughout the course of the game, you're playing various missions in the European theater of World War II. So we start off with northern France, and as you can see here, it's a relatively basic looking horizontal scroller. We have the ability to move around the stage like normal, and we also have our shot, but we do have some special weapons. So as you shoot these helicopters, they'll leave behind these icons. There are 5 different icons you can pick up, as well as a 1-up. So the S that we just picked up increases our speed. There's a B, which gives us the special weapon, the bomb. The M here will give us the special weapon, missiles. There's also a T, which gives us a turret-like special weapon, and an E, which fires a cluster shell, which explodes into kind of shrapnel that does damage in kind of a short-range, almost shotgun-like pattern. It's very effective, but can be a little bit harder to use. Really, with this title having as many ground targets as it does, the best and most useful weapon is more often than not the bomb, but there are a couple situations where that's not always the case. There do happen to be some other mechanics at play. There are enemy commanders that will run along the bottom of the stage trying to escape. They're indicated as being kind of like a personnel carrier or a tank with a German flag on it. If they're allowed to escape, then the enemy forces will become stronger, so you want to take them out if you happen to see them. Here's the 1-up. Each stage will progress through a certain length until we get to the boss. Sometimes the boss is really obvious. Other times it's not quite as obvious if you've actually gotten to the end of the stage. So in the first stage, we're fighting specifically the cannon that's at the end of this train, but it's the whole train itself that can be considered the boss. If you happen to have the special weapon, the bomb, especially with it set to rapid fire, which is a great additional feature that's available on the arcade archive emulators, then you can definitely make short work of this enemy. One thing that I do have a bit of a gripe with is there are no health bars or even really any indication that you're successfully doing damage to the boss itself until bam, it's blown up and you see the completed. There is an exception to that though. There are a couple stages where you're fighting battleships, and those battleships do show signs of damage throughout the course of the fight. So in the second stage here, we see another problem I do have with this game. You have a kind of a neat parallax scrolling effect with the bottom of the screen, but the problem with that is it's actually pretty jarring to see, at least at first, and the shots happen to be just the same color as the sunset we're flying against. Another thing I can also talk about is our special weapons do power up the more we collect. So you start at level 1, you can upgrade the special weapons up to what would essentially be a level 4, as long as you're not losing lives. If you do lose a life, then the special weapons will downgrade only by 1 level, and you'll still have that special weapon. So it is somewhat forgiving that way, and I do appreciate that. So there we have it. That basically is P-47, the Freedom Fighter, or as it was known outside of Japan, Thunderbolt, served up for your enjoyment. So the game itself just doesn't really feel like it stands out in any significant way. It has a really nice, at least classic for the time sounding synthesized soundtrack, but let's talk about the minus and the plus flavors. So the minus flavors, so there are issues with a couple of the backgrounds being difficult on the eyes, this one being one of them. There are a couple others throughout the course of the game that can be a little bit hard to look at as well. And then there are issues with slowdown. Certain stages, especially as you get to the more difficult stages, and if you happen to play the game two-player, then slowdown becomes an even bigger issue. So that's something to keep in mind. It was maybe pushing the hardware for its time, just maybe a little bit more than the system had as far as being robust. But then for the plus flavors, I do like the classic arcade feel that it has, even if it doesn't really stand out in any particular way. It does everything in kind of a solid, basic horizontal scroller. And then the boss fights, though there is a little bit of frustration with not having the health bars or anything like that to indicate how well you're performing against them, they are fun and different in that a lot of times you're fighting ground units like tanks or battleships, kind of along the lines of one of my favorite all-time shoot-'em-ups, UN Squadron, or Area 88, if you prefer that title for it. Though I feel this game doesn't handle it anywhere near as well as that one. So, there you have it. P-47 served up for your enjoyment. For the most part, this is just one that just feels just a little bit too bland for my taste, and unless you're really looking for another fairly derivative horizontal scroller, I think this one is one that you could probably take a pass on safely. Alright, that'll just about wrap it up for this week's episode of Shoot 'em Up Saturday. As always, I want to thank you so much for joining me this week, and I look forward to seeing you again next week.